All right, welcome to the Church Dropout Podcast. My name is Alan. I'm the host. Church Dropout is a podcast. We talk about issues, topics, and teachings related to faith, life, and culture in ways that are sometimes funny, sometimes serious, but always insightful. If you have not already, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below. Keep the conversation moving forward. So as you've seen in the title, I had to address this. There were some things to me that were really concerning and sad, if I might say, concerning, the response of some Christians, followers of Christ, in relation to how we should have compassion and care for the poor or the marginalized. Now, this is not like one of those things where it's like, okay, you have to see things my way or this way. And, I believe in unity, not uniformity. I think that there are many streams. I do think that there are some right streams and some wrong streams and different things of that sort. But I think ultimately we can work things out if we look at scripture, look at Jesus, and continue to move forward. But this is not one of those things where I feel like, this is just, me. And everyone should think the way I think. I do think that there are some things that I think are universal in terms of how Christians ought to respond to suffering in the world. And I'm not talking about, giving money or, all of that type stuff. Like that we should respond. I guess I should say it this way, that we should respond to it in the same way, a very specific way. But I think our attitude towards suffering and, having compassion, I think is universal to the Christian faith. I think as Christians, we're called to do that and to be compassionate, and for many reasons. But here's what I'm addressing. I feel like I'm rambling, but here's what I'm addressing. Reading through the comments as it related to the last few videos that I did, one on, caring for the unborn, but not the born. And then the other one of Christians, quit, Lord have mercy, I can't even think of the name of my video. But Christians, not necessarily paying attention to the marginalized, trying to look here for the exact title. Christians stop rationalizing neglect of the marginalized. And so as I'm reading through some of the comments, man, it's sad. Reading some of the comments and some of the things that people are saying. Like I said, I know that there's different perspectives and points of view on, how we should go about, meeting the needs of the poor, or whether we should or shouldn't. And I know there's different perspectives on that. But the part that was most concerning to me was the lack of compassion and care for the issue, right? As I said before, these things for Christians in America have become very political. Like we are removed from any sort of real understanding of what's happening in these places. We tend to go on what's reported or statistics and all of that type stuff, but we very rarely really understand what's happening. We just believe what's being told to us. And let me say this, the American gospel is the prosperity gospel, okay? The American gospel is the prosperity gospel. And I'm not just talking about, Benny Hinn's and different individuals who are preaching the prosperity gospel. This is, in my opinion, something that is rooted in the American church culture. And I don't care if you're Reformed or, Baptist, and it doesn't really make a difference. I think the American gospel is, is based, is really honestly privileged. It is the prosperity gospel because of the privilege. And we have a very privileged gospel. where we can, talk about things, theologize about things, and not really have any real understanding of what those things really entail. Right? We're very privileged in how we talk about these issues, and we're very privileged in how we see the world, and so, I think as Christians, again, we are not reading the text. We're not reading the Bible. We're not looking at Jesus. We are, stuck in this constant battle of interpretation that doesn't lead to mobilization, right? It just leads to more arguments. And unfortunately, there was just some things that were said that I thought were, pretty bad. And I got a few text messages, from individuals who were reading through the comments, and they were saying like, man, like what's going on here? Like, and so listen, this is not everybody who was in those comments and stuff like that. Like I said, some people disagreed, and they disagree respectfully, and, we can disagree. I get that, but there were some things that were said that I think were just out of line. There was a lot of, too bad, type deal. That's not our problem. They can help themselves, they're able-bodied, they can help themselves. People need to get up and work. You know what I mean? Like these answers that really lack any sort of compassion, that, to be honest, are really talking points of the right, that are being projected on millions of people, these generalizations that are being projected on millions of people. And you can really see that a lot of these people have no contact with individuals who are suffering in this way. And that's why I say, like, the American gospel is very privileged. We can stand aside and talk about issues and talk about these things without really even knowing somebody who's suffering these types of things. And, so we base our arguments on these generalizations, and some of these things they just lack compassion and lack care and concern. And, many of these Christians have bought into this idea of toxic empathy that is going around, that Christians can't empathize, right? We have to be all about truth, as if truth is not accompanied by grace and mercy. And it was really disheartening to read a lot of these comments. Now, everybody who wrote those comments, I don't know if they're Christian or not. Some folks, I think, were just commenting, listening to the video. I don't think everyone was a Christian, but there were some who were making it explicitly clear that from the perspective they were coming from, they're a Christian, and, these individuals, don't need help. They're taking advantage of the system. And this gross mischaracterization of everyone who's in the system is responding the same way. And I think to react that way is so much of a lack of compassion and care. And so, and then also, I mean, to be honest with you, I think many people who claim to follow Jesus, call themselves Christians, really don't understand the gospel, right? Like, if we truly understand that we were saved by grace and that it was done by the mercy of God, that, we are not deserving. That's another thing I heard in there too, taking from the deserving, giving it to the undeserving, that we were not deserving of what Christ gave us. And that, he chose to move towards broken humanity and to rescue us and save us. And that type of love should lead to Christians loving that deeply. Not looking for ways to not engage, but looking for ways to engage and to care for people radically, and to allow love to change the hearts of people who have a hard heart, or people who are taking advantage of the system. Um, you know, Christians are choosing to, back away and say, hey, listen, they need to do it themselves. And that's not even the gospel. That's America. American, America says, lace your bootstraps, you know what I mean? And pick yourself up. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's Americanism. That's not the gospel. That's not the way Christ calls us to function and act in the world. We are a countercultural movement. We look different. We act different. And the problem is that we refuse to be different. And Christians have just adopted Americanism as Christianity, and has lost the real understanding of what it means to be a recipient of God's grace, and therefore give God's grace out. Now, again, this is not about agreeing with how we should, who we should. This is just the attitude and the mindset that has been displayed towards people who are in need. The the generalization, the lack of compassion, it's just atrocious. And I think a lot of repentance, is needed. And this entitlement that we feel that we can even have that type of conversation, like for that to come out of people's mouth, I just don't understand that. Like, I don't understand how somebody could just be like, too bad, they need to work. You know what I mean? Like, especially when when it's not just that individual who's being affected, right? I just think it's sad. And to see Christians behave this way just shows the state of the church in America, and how much the prosperity gospel, has affected the church. Not just the prosperity gospel in terms of, preachers asking for money, but this privileged gospel that we have here, in America, that centers on Americanism and almost preaches an Americanized gospel. It's just showing the state that the church is in today. So anyway, I had to address that. I think we need more compassion. I think we need grace. I think we need to move incarnationally closer to individuals, so that we can know what the stories are, and not just rely on what we're being told, and not make these sweeping generalizations about communities and people who are suffering. And listen, and here's the last thing. And listen, this is what you're going to hear. I'm trying to, honestly, I'm trying to follow Jesus and really look at what that means to embody what Christ embodied in today's cultural climate. And that's what it's about, right? It's not about red or blue. It's not about, which, eschatological view you have, what all of that stuff. I listen, it's great to have fun to talk about some of those things, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how God has called the Christian to live out in the world right now. And I know that those things may have implications on that, but one thing we can't deny is that Christ has called us to live the gospel, and to do it in the same way that he did, and to look upon them with compassion and give them a type of care that points them to the cross, not condemnation. You know what I mean? Like, we're not here to condemn people in their sin. We're here to bring renewal and restoration through the gospel. So anyway, I just felt like I had to address that, and, drop a comment below, honestly. Let's talk about it. You know what I mean? And, again, this is not about, political perspective or whether the government should be doing and all of that type stuff. This is just the type of things that come out of Christians' mouths, and how our position and our stance is towards communities and individuals that God calls us to move towards, right? And how we can just lack compassion and care for that and still call ourselves followers of Christ is amazing to me. So anyway, thank you so much for tuning in to the Church Dropout podcast. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below. Keep the conversation moving forward. God bless.